that which is fit for human consumption, you cannot make fit a bandage. Ask the Gemara, where does it say that doesn't apply to that which is for animal consumption? You don't make this medrash. Now, this means that the lachem must stand. It says lachem, which is an exclusion. So if we're going to use that lachem in any way, shape, or form, it has to give an advantage to machal adam over machal behema. That which is for human consumption has a higher degree of restriction than that which is for animal consumption. So therefore, even if you want to say that machal behema has restrictions on it, it can't have the same degree of restriction as machal adam, as that which is for human consumption. Therefore, by definition, we're going to have to give that which is suitable for human consumption a higher priority. What's the higher priority you give it is that you can't use it to make bandages.
And what about bandages for an animal?
That we're going to learn. We're going to actually discuss that. Okay? It says in a few lines. Rabbi Yossi lo amar ken. Rabbi Yossi didn't say the drush this way, rather he said the drush a different way. Ela v'oitzer Shabbos otzlachem lochla. That which the land produces during its Sabbath should be for you to eat. Mi'et. This is an exclusion. Lavdecha ulamoscha. For your slaves, that's another mi'et, another exclusion. Miut achar miut. One exclusion, then another exclusion. That's a riboy. What does it come to be marba here? What does it come to include? L'rabos ochle behema shos mem belugma. It comes to include that which...
it says ochle yodam.
It says ochle yodam?
Yeah.
No, it's a mistake though. Can't be. L'rabos ochle behema shos mem belugma l'adam. Right, because it means that ochle behema you can use to make a melugma for a person. Right? Kai domer Rabun Barchil, like what Rabun Barchil said, called Medrash Doresh for Shover Medrash Rishon Ein Ze Medrash. Oh, I skipped line. I skipped line. Ve'ema Deribe Ochle Odom. Let's say once we have an inclusion, since Ein Miut Achar Miut El Rabos, that includes that even Ochle Odom can be used to make bandages as well. No, because then again I have that lachem, which I must use to elevate Ochle Odom to superior status, and therefore. That which Rabun Barchil said, anytime you have a medrash which would damage the other medrash, you can't use that medrash, and therefore I have to give a superior status to Ochel Adam. Rabbi Matanya, and Matanya said, he just learns from logic, not from sukkim. When you exclude from bandages, Ochli Adam me'atita. You have to exclude human consumed food. Uksharavisa, when you include Ochli Behem or Ravisa, you have to include Ochli Behem. You have to include that which is for animal consumption. You have to. I'm not sure. I think now looking again, he says that. What he's saying is that he's going on the psukim. He's going on the fact that there's a miut achar miut l'rabos. He's saying logic dictates that it's only being marbe when it's including additional uses. It's including machal behema, that you can use it for human bandages. Why is that? Because in a philosophical perspective, human bandages are a superior use than feeding animals, right? Right, because you're using it for human purpose, right? So therefore, he says logic dictates that if we have a riboy that allows more usage, it must be that ochle behema can be used as a malugma for Adam, which is a superior form of usage, rather than saying that ochle Adam can be used for a malugma for Adam, which is a inferior usage because you're taking it down a notch from food to bandage. Okay, so bandage for humans is higher than food for animals. Now, Ochle Behema, what can we take? Do you have the place, by the way? Yeah. Ochle Behema. Food for animals. Ma'ala sos me'em tsevoim l'odam. Can use it to make cosmetics for human beings. Umayim ochle odam. There should be a logic. That was food which is fit for human consumption. She'eno si me'em malugma l'odam, from which you cannot make a bandage. Os me'em tsevoim l'odam, you can't use it to make cosmetics. Ochle Behema. Animal food, shosim melugmaladim, from which you may make a bandage for a human being. Lo koshke is not a kavachom shosim soin ladim. You certainly should be able to use it for cosmetics. That's the end. We accept that, obviously. that which is suitable for animal consumption can certainly be used for human cosmetic. Next question. Mine melugmios. What about stuff which is, in and of itself, bandage material? That's the only normal usage it has. Mine melugmios malasos man tzavoin laws, we can use them for cosmetics. So again, v'lav kavachomer is in a kavachomer. Umayim ochlei odam. The things that are suitable for human consumption, no siman melugma odam, from which you cannot make. Bandages, osiman tzavoin laws, can be used to make cosmetics. Mine melugmios, types of the fruit which in and of themselves, their primary normal usage is bandages. Which are used for bandages. You make for them cosmetics for humans, and we accept that kavachorma too. That's true. That which is normally used for human bandage can be used also for human cosmetic. Lo tzurcha, the law, you don't need this question, but rather only for the law is like a contraction, do ella. This question is only asked by ochle behema. And by ochle behema, maula sos mehem tzvoim lodim. Can you use animal food to make animal bandages? Okay, in other words, an animal has a wound. Can you make an ointment or a salve from food, from stuff which otherwise would go for food? Do I say that just like ba'ochle odam, by stuff which is suitable for human consumption, you cannot make a bandage for a person on stuff. Well, let me say it with the right inflection. Just like you said by ochle odam, by stuff which is fit for human consumption, but you can't use it to make a bandage for a person. But nonetheless, you can use it to make a cosmetic. The kabbalah, so too maybe I say, that which is suitable for animal consumption. Even though you cannot use it to make a bandage for an animal, but maybe we can use it to make cosmetics for an animal. Says more, no. Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi said, no, more work. That which is suitable for human consumption, you can use to make cosmetics, because we find that cosmetics have kedusha. We found that earlier in the Masechta, stuff which is made for coloring skin or coloring any purpose for human being, not just cosmetic, but for any purpose of coloring human clothing and such like. So that has kedusha and shmita. Therefore, we can use that food which is destined for an animal to make cosmetics. However, or even food which is destined for a human being, we can use to make cosmetics. However, do you want to make from that which is animal fodder, animal coloring? You can't do that. The tzivei behema elem kedusha, that which is a plant which is natural usage is to color stuff which has to do with animals. It doesn't have kedusha Shevi'is. The only thing which has kedusha Shevi'is are ochel adam, ochel behema, and seva adam. Seva behema doesn't have kedusha Shevi'is. So in that case, logic dictates that I have to say that you cannot take an ochel behema and turn it into a seva behema. Because it takes something which has kedusha Shevi'is inherently and turning it into something which doesn't have inherent kedusha Shevi'is. That probably, in all probability, says the Gemara, has got to be awesome. Okay? Now, I don't think you have the header here, but I'll read you the header anyway. You place upon, if a person thought that something should be both human consumption and animal fodder, you give it the chumash of both. I understand all the chumash of ochel adam, that it has to go for persons eating or for something else, but not to go for bandages. But chumrei behema, what chumrah is that? If you consider it to be ochel behema, when it's ochel behema, it just gives kulas. What chumrah does ochel behema possibly give? Right? If you consider something ochel behema as addition to ochel adam, what possible chumrah does that give? It says where there is one chumrah. Shas l'shokon. You're not allowed to cook them, because animals don't eat their food cooked; they eat them raw. So therefore, normally, if you have fruit which has kedusha Shevi'is, you can cook it before you eat it and eat it cooked, because that's considered to be the normal derech of using it. But by stuff which you intended to be simultaneously for human consumption, animal consumption, you can't cook it, because animals don't eat cooked food. So therefore, that's a case where being designated for animals is a chumrah over being designated for human being. Tanya, we learned in the Brayta. Probably don't have a lot of what I'm about to read, but this goes without saying. If I'm a seller and I sell you food as food, and you buy the food as food, and then after you buy the food, you think, you know what? Let me use it instead of food. I'll use it as firewood, right? In order to stoke my fire. By that time, the buyer has already bought it under the impression that it's food, and therefore can't lose its status as food. You're not allowed to use it then as firewood. And even if the seller is selling for the point of selling as food, and the buyer is buying it as wood, the buyer cannot change the intent the buyer cannot change the intent of the seller, which is to sell it as food, and retains its Yerushalmi Shevi'is. What about a case where
what about the intent of the seller rather than the buyer?
Right. But now, however, what about the other case? If somebody sells for the purpose of the wood, but the buyer, and therefore doesn't have Yerushalmi Shevi'is, but the buyer buys it as food, and therefore the buyer wants to impart Yerushalmi Shevi'is. Does it get imparted or not? Says what are we talking about? I'm bringing a little bit of Chayshim Mishpat here. We're talking about a case where the buyer paid, and then the Mashiach, so the Me'etzim Nasalo, when he paid for wood, and therefore the status of this stuff is determined to be wood, not to be fruit. First he acquired it and then gave money, so the Me'ochlin Nasalo. So then in that case, he's giving him the money. He's giving the seller his money of food, right? Because by the time he paid for it, he already designated it as food, right? When he did Mashiach, he designated it as food.
Except he did Mashiach on an object that wasn't his.
No, Mashiach kinda.
But the seller is not willing to give up his rights.
The seller doesn't care. What?
The seller doesn't give up his rights of ownership until he gets his money.
No. Mashiach Kona we paskin.
Mashiach is a kinyan after the transfer of money.
No. I mean, it is, but here, when he gets the money, the sale went through. The Mashiach determined what it was. The Mashiach determined that it was going based on the buyer's opinion, which is that it's going to be Ochel. Mashiach's credit. We're going to get into that right now. We'll prove the Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. It's really the same as Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Al daited Rabbi Yochanan do Amar. According to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, that he said, Hamos konin devar Torah, that money is the kinyan, the preferable kinyan deraisa, and Mashiach is only kinyan derabbanan. Me'ochlin nosan lo. So then, when he paid him the money, he's already giving him that. He's already giving him the money of food. I skipped a line. No wonder that's right.
We have animals.
Yeah, I skipped a line. No, but that's not a problem. I skipped a line. So before that, our shayla is like this: if he paid first and then Mashiach afterwards, what's the status in that case? And this is Machlokes Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. Al daited Rabbi Yochanan, quote Rabbi Yochanan the Amar, who says Hamos konen divrei Torah. Rabbi Yochanan says money isn't a valid acquisition deraisa. So therefore, if you paid money and then he did Mashiach, so the me'ochim nasan lo. When he paid him the money, at that point it was still the mochers. The mocher sells him as food, so he's paying for food, and it's a food transaction. That's the food. Al daited Reish Lakish Tomar Eina Maus Konas to Dvar Torah. According to Reish Lakish, who said that the money is not about acquisition midaraisa, only midarabanan. So here in this case, well, even midarabanan it's not, but you got to be shapara. But here, where the money preceded the mashicha, by the time the mashicha, at that time, the seller, or rather I should say the buyer, who intended to buy it for the purpose of food, doesn't yet have any rights over it. Am I right about this?
Why, didn't the shiur before you paid for it?
What?
No, he gave him money first.
I gave him money first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't have rights because he doesn't have possession.
Right. No, but if the money doesn't afford him any possession. Let's go again according to, over the case, because I don't know if I got it right, if I said it over right. We're talking about a case where first the guy paid, Lokech intends to sell it as wood. I mean, no, the mocher. The mocher is selling as wood, and Lokech is buying as food. Okay? You gave the money before Mashiach. Kohen Rabbi Yochanan says most konos, when he's giving the money, the buyer is giving the money, he sets the nature of the transaction. Okay? So therefore, if he says, here's the money and I'm buying it as food, then his opinion wins the day. Kohen Reish Lakish, who said most Einan konos, giving the money doesn't give him any viable rights to set the nature of the transaction. So if the mocher says, I'm selling it to you as wood, even though I'm accepting the money, that gives you no rights of ownership yet. And therefore, I determine the nature of the transaction, and therefore it's considered to be a transaction on wood, not a transaction on anything edible. Okay? So again, if you're most konos divrei Torah, so when the buyer gives the money, he can set the nature of the transaction. If you're most einan konos midaraisa, so then the seller sets the nature of the transaction, whether it's going to be food or whether it's going to be for the purpose of firewood.
Well, the Reish Lakish say the machine is a kinyan d'Rabbanan.
Correct. Question whether most is kinyan d'Oraisa. Okay? Hamocher mocher leitzim. What if the seller is selling for wood, and the buyer is buying for food, and neither of them is budging. This guy was standing in place, and this guy standing in place. In other words, they're not willing to concede to each other the point. So Yeva Kada. Let's bring into this Yehiba, like the following case. The time we went to the Brisa in the end of Kiddushin. We came to what's the word? Gridlock. A standstill. Impasse, right, good word. SAT word. Okay. You came to an impasse. I say I want to buy for wood. You say you want to sell for food. And nobody agrees. Between the two of us, we don't agree to change.
There's been no transaction.
No transaction. Then the mocher comes and says, you know what, let's do the deal. So then if the mocher comes and says, let's make the transaction anyway, he's conceding to the buyer on the buyer's terms. It's probably a principle in secular law as well.
Well, actually, it's more comparable to the movie The Godfather. It has to do with who tells the other about a meeting. That's the bad guy. That gets spot, so he loses out.
Okay.
Does he make him an offer he can't refuse?
Yes.
If the buyer says, you know what, let's do the deal, so then he asks the mocher, it goes on the mocher's terms. So Yivakah came. So to the same thing as here. Whoever says, whoever blinks first, right, and says, let's go through the deal, he's conceding to the other person's conditions. Okay, on we go. Next Mishnah. Shvi'is nitenes la'achila. Shvi'is can be eaten. Shtia, drinking, drunk. Sicha, it can be used to anoint oneself. Lechel davar shtar karku lechel, you eat that which is normally eaten. Losuch, you anoint yourself with that which is normally davar shtar karku losuch. Lo yasuch, and therefore you can't anoint yourself with wine and with vinegar. Avol sachos l'shem, you can anoint yourself with oil. V'chein b'truma meiser sheni, so too is the case with truma and meiser sheni, that they will have to be used for their intended purpose. Except, common of shvi'is in one respect is lighter. Shenida lakas, and there you could use it as fuel in order to light your candle. Says Gemara, I have a tanya here, but it's from a brisa. What does it mean that you can eat that which is normally eaten? We don't make you eat a bread which has become moldy, even though it's Shemitah bread. You're not compelled to eat it. It's a chula which we're making for you. You should think, if it's holy, you have to eat it. No, you don't have to eat it. If you have had a lettuce and some of the leaves are bad, you don't have to eat the leaves which you cut off the head. Also, nor if you have a dish sitting in your fridge for several weeks on end and it looks suspicious at the end, you don't have to eat it. Okay? However, works the other way too. Let's say the person wants to eat, he wants to eat raw beets. Or eat raw wheat. Ain't shomilo. We don't let you do that. Because that's shaloka darko also. Which we're making on you that you don't have to eat stuff which is bad. We don't let you eat stuff which is good in a way which is not its normal way of being eaten. Beets are not good if they're not cooked. So do the same thing with raw wheat. So therefore you can't eat it that way. Okay? Ketza lishos davar shodarko lishos. What does it mean that you drink that which is normally drunk? We don't make you drink the water in which vegetables were cooked. Even though the chor has a taste of vegetables or shemitah, water in which you cook fruits as well. We're not machayev because it's not normal derech to drink that.
What do you do with that water? Can it
throw it out?
Dispose of the regular way?
You can dispose the regular way.
Because the other food, you can't.
We're going to talk about that. When we get to the next mission. Nor do we make you drink the wine out of the dregs. On the other hand, somebody who has a toothache, he can't gargle with vinegar and spit it out, which would normally be permitted, because that's, denigrating the fresh meat, the fruit. He can gargle and swallow. And he can dip his bread in vinegar, even though his sole intent is for the purpose of the cure, and Eino Choshesh is not a problem. Let's worry about it. HaChoshesh Begrono, somebody who has a ache in his throat hurts. Lo Ya'en B'Shemen, he can't gargle with oil because he's going to spit it out. But you can put a lot of oil into cooked vegetable juice and swallow it, and that's okay. Okay? Even though he's doing it for the purpose of refuah, he's allowed to do that during Shemitah as well. One is not allowed to, I guess you don't have that header, you're not allowed to anoint yourself with wine or with vinegar, etc. Tani, we learned. Achoshesh Barosho, somebody who has a pain in his head, dandruff or something, or Sholobachatan, he has some sort of itch. Sach Shemini, he can anoint himself with oil. With wine and vinegar. One cannot improve the fragrance of the oil of vinegar by adding spices and herbs. You know why not? Why not? You can't add spices and herbs to the oil in order to enhance its fragrance.
Well, what are you doing with the oil eventually?
You're anointing it.
Because the spices and herbs are in internal consumption. It's food.
No. Let's say it's spice and herbs of chutzlar. Still can't do it. Because they absorb the oil. So some of the oil gets lost. It's ma'abed perush mita. Okay, it causes them to get lost. But you can buy improved oil. Shemen orev means, oil which is made very pleasant by adding all these herbs. You come from anybody, you don't have to be concerned that the seller mixed in herbs of Shemitah. Now, that's all Rabbi Ami Sovar made. Rabbi Ami thought to say, you can even buy it under those circumstances for somebody who's suspect to take a mix. Rabbi Yasi, no. Yasa. Only a person where you don't know whether he's suspicious or not. But if you know he's a suspicious person and it's probable, then he mixed in the oil in a way that stuff got lost, right? Because it got absorbed into herbs and spices, so that's prohibited to buy from that individual. Now, can you put in spices into wine of Shevi'is? Why should this be more mutter? Because even though some wine gets absorbed into the spices, but the spices enhance the taste of the wine, right? So therefore, perhaps since it makes the wine more enhanced and perhaps probably more expensive, so therefore we'd be matzah in this case because it's in hand for Shevi'is. Right, that's Gemara's question. The Shmina min Adah, it's learned from the following case. From the statement in our Mishnah, Kal Shmehen Shevi'is. Shevi'is is more lenient. Shenitna L'adlokas Haner. It's that you can use it in order to light candles. Hadamar Shemuta tells us that even though it's a type of usage which is less distinguished, because you're using it for oil instead of eating it. Nonetheless, it's permissible. So here too, we say it's permissible. Damar shum mutter. Right? You're allowed to use it. Also, you're allowed to use the oil, the wine in a way in which some of it will get lost in the herbs and spices which you put in. Says Mara, Vatani also did we learn another price that's forbidden to mix in the wine with the wine with the herbs and spices. Says Mara, Rabbi Lasa to Rabbi Yehuda. That which he said it's mutter is like Rabbi Yehuda. None Rabbi Yehuda Omer Matim Neshim Ashbicho. The Rabbi Yehuda is the one who said it's permitted to mix the wine with spices because it makes the wines better. Comment Shvuz v'choy. Again, I'm sure you don't have this header. Shemitah Shevi'is is less severe. Ask more Truna. The Truna need no Lokas Haner. What do you mean? It sounds like only Shemitah you're allowed to use to burn the candle, not Truma. Why is that true? Says more, yes, Truma Tzmeya need not Lokas Haner. You can use Truma Tzmeya to light your candle. Avol, however, no Avol here. Tahara lo need no Lokas Haner. Pure Truma cannot be used for lighting your candle. Shevi'is, however, Shemitah oil, afilu Torah need no Lokas Haner. Even Torah Shemitah oil can be used to light your candle. Rabbi Chizkiah went to bathe. Yoav Sluchitza, he gave a bottle of Shemitah oil, L'zusime Ulayra, to Zusman, right? I always thought Zusman's a Yiddish name, but here it is. To Zusman, the bathhouse attendant. Amalei, so he said, bring me the Shemitah oil into the inner room so I can anoint myself with it. So Zusman was a shtickle Talmud Chacham here. Amalei, so it's so awesome. He said, isn't this awesome? It's Shemitah oil, you can't bring it to the bathroom. That kind of kedusha. So it was a push to Yid. It's probably not Ma'aretz, but he understood Shemitah's got to have kedusha. Asashol Rabbi Yirmiyah. So Rabbi Chizkiah went and asked Rabbi Yirmiyah. Amalei, so he said, Tovei Malei, come and say to him. Come say to who? I guess. No, here means come and tell Rabbi Chizkiah. Limantanu, you taught us, he didn't really, but he was saying like in a nice way. You taught us, you're not allowed to use the oil of Shemitah in a bathhouse. You can put it on your skin outside, and then nichnas go into the bathhouse with it on your skin already. Because then it's considered part and parcel of your skin. But you can't anoint it, spread it when you're in the bathhouse. Similarly, v'lo shemen sreifa, you can't take even truma tmeya, which you're just going to burn as fuel. You can't take it lo bebeis kisei, not into a bathroom, below base merchatz, nor do bathhouse. Minei bizayin kachim, because you are degrading kachim. Okay. And before we start the next Mishnah, very important Chazonish. Chazonish says you're allowed to peel fruit during Shemitah. Even apples. Not just oranges. Even apples. The apple peeler edible. But that's derech from the other. A lot of people peel apples. What you do is you store the apple peels, then it's somewhere until they become unsuitable for machal behema, and then you can throw them out. Until it's unsuitable for ma'achol adam, and then you can throw it out, because then it loses kedusha shemitah. But it peels. They do in Eretz Yisrael nowadays. Those keep shemitah. They do keep peels. They don't throw out peels in regular garbage. because they still have kedusha shmita. Even orange peels, I believe, because orange peels are machal behema. They are used for machal behema. So if they store the peels somewhere special until they go bad, and then they throw them out. Okay, because then they lose the kedusha shmita.
Well, they had special garbage.
Were you in Israel during Shemitah?
Yeah.
So you saw that, right? The
My
special
daughter had
garbage
special
can.
garbage cans. And
Yeah.
I mean, all the food stuff. So the garbage,
Right.
was collected.
No. Nothing. No. Only Chol Moed. 7:30 Chol Moed. Ashrecha v'toivlach. Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
what about regular Shemitah food, which Kedusha Shvi'is? Can you take that into the bathroom?
What?
You couldn't
Regular
take
food?
oil, regular Shemitah food.
No, same to Kav Chomer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
This is
you
even oil. Even this is, this is anointing stuff.
So that's
Yeah.
for me. So you couldn't take anything into the
Any
bathroom?
Shemitah food into the bathroom, right? Right. Okay, our bathrooms are not as disgusting as theirs, so maybe there would be more Malcolm to make, but no, surely one's makbid. That's what it says here. Okay. One cannot sell Shemitah fruit, lo b'mida, not by measure, not by amount, lo b'mishkol, nor by weight, lo b'minyan, nor by counting. Lo te'enim b'minyan, even though figs are normally sold by weight, and you want to be mashana and sell them by measure, it's not enough of a shinui. Below yerek and vegetables, which are normally sold by count, you want to sell them by mishkal, by weight, which is a shinui. It's not enough of a shinui. You have to sell specifically only by estimate, by approximate. You can't even sell shmita fruit in bundles. With so many eshedarku lego, you make a shinui in how you bundle it. That which is normally bundled in the house, you bundle it instead in the marketplace. And accretions such as cress and netzach cholav and whatever this else is.
Now, what's the reason for this? Because it's the meaning.
Lama. Kedeshim kru bezol, nor they should be sold for cheaper. Ask more of yishkul b'litrevim kru bezol. So let's give a bargain per pound. Let's make it like a supermarket sale. No, there are two reasons. Imat omer kate, if you sold it by weight, also there's another issue. Afu eino noi boy and kedusha, you don't realize that they're kodesh. So you're right. This is a way of reminding a person that this food is kodesh, and also to make them affordable. Because after all, the whole purpose of Shemitah, at least parts of it, was that aniyim should be able to get Shemitah fruit, and you're kind of defeating the purpose. You would sell it at full price. Tani, we learned pears chutzlar shnichnasu la'aretz. Fruit from chutzlar which came into Eretz Yisrael becomes part of this gzeira. Lo yunim kohen, they can't be sold lo b'midah, not by weight and count, not by amount, lo b'mishkol, nor by weight, lo minyan, nor by counting. El kaperos aretz, only like fruit of Eretz Yisrael. Ima yunikorit. However, let's say you knew it came from chutzlar, it's a face like a fruit which you don't normally have in Israel, star fruit. So then mutar, then you can sell by exact measure, right?
Now, is this halacha about?
Yeah. They don't sell by weight.
They don't in Eretz Yisrael?
No, if they do, then they have some heter of otzar based in, which I don't know exactly how it works yet. And I hope we're going to see something like that, which is that the seller is not selling. The seller is a shliach, it's like a mechiras chometz heter. He's a shliach, a based in. A based in selling, and a based in is allowed to sell b'midah. It's only a private seller who's not allowed to
But
do
when I
it.
recall in the Makola, they sold.
They sold
just
it,
like
they,
this is
They come out with mechiras chometz type of term. Okay? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi Barbun, what's an example? Let's go in Elaine Klukosai, a certain type of vegetable. The salkin mizdamu, which is brought up and is sold, means susita from susita, which is exempt from Shemitah, Litveria, and it's sold in Tveria, so there they can sell by exact measure. And Chisra b'shem Rabbi Abba Memel said, person who was selling by the basketful, which was an estimate, but it became exact enough after 2-3 times. In other words, after a while, he figured out exactly how much the basket holds. Also, he's not allowed to use the basket anymore. He has to discard the basket. A person says, I'll sell you by the basket, which is approximate up to this line where my finger is. That's also because that's also measuring. Okay. Tabach Kohen Shismailo Bechor, a Kohen butcher who happens to have a Bechor to sell. Mao mikte kuptin, can he cut the meat into cuts? Umizdabna go shuk and sell it in the marketplace. Or is the prohibition on selling bechora so strong that you can't even do that? Rabbi Misavar Meimar Shari Minado. We don't want to say it's permissible from our Mishnah. And Shadarko Lego Vayasogna that which is normally bundled in your house, you bundle in the marketplace. So here too, you can cut it and sell it in the marketplace. In other words, instead of cutting it home and bringing the cuts, you just cut in the marketplace, and that's good enough. Ramona said, Kol Garma hi Amra Duaser. This entire thing tells us that it's forbidden. That it shouldn't look like you're making business off the body of the Bechor itself. In other words, basically what we're saying is that by Bechor, it's whether you cut it at home or cut it in the marketplace, it's not a sufficient shinui. Because you're selling it like a regular cut of meat. So therefore, that's never permitted. By bundling vegetables, people there is a shinui. People generally bundle in the marketplace or bundle at home and bring the pre-cut packages into the marketplace. So therefore, and the shinui there, it's not, this doesn't look, there the shinui is significant. Here the shinui is insignificant. Where you cut the meat, it's still there, schor, it makes a difference.
What if vegetables are sold by the bundle? Let's say a bundle of carrots or a head of lettuce.
You can't do that during Shemitah, that's what it says here.
You have to have a shinui.
Right. Ha'omer, lepoel, somebody says to worker, Helach iser zeh, take this coin, ulukotli yerakayom, and gather with it for me vegetables today. Schoro mutter. It's you're allowed. That's okay. It's good. He's allowed to accept his wages. L'kodli bo yerakayom. We said bo in it. In other words, I want you for this coin to collect for me vegetables, and it's schor also. Why? Because that looks much more like a sale. So then it's like selling perishmis, because I say for this coin, that specification makes it more prohibited. So to lokach min anachtom kikor rapunyon, I bought from a baker a loaf for $1, loaf which is worth $1. I didn't pay him $1, and I said to the baker, you know what? Elko to Yerako soda. When I gather some vegetables from the field, avilach, I'll bring them to you mutter, because it doesn't look like like a sale. However, you took it in without saying anything. You can't pay him from Shemitah money. You cannot pay back a debt with Shemitah money, because again, it's making business with Shemitah money. Okay, I have a header here, Schora Mutter, his wage is permissible. Ma ben Omer L'Kotli, ask the one, what's going on here? That there's a difference between when I tell you collect for me, Ma ben Omer L'Kotli Bo, collect for me for the $1. So Rabbi Mishem Rabbi Yisrael said, Mehilchol she'imu he. Imu means unclear or blurry. So the way the Kavanaki explains me, he says it means that this is one of the unclear halachos. In other words, look, one of these random distinctions which Chazal made, arbitrary distinctions, for probably a better term. These arbitrary distinctions Chazal made, which really has no basis. Okay? This arbitrary distinction, there's really no basis to it, and it's hard to understand what's the difference whether you said bo or not. That's the way he explains it, but I have a much better pshat. My pshat is like this. He said that certain halachas which Chazal said are contingent on there being a certain vague or what's the word? Ill-defined. Amorphous, right? Amorphous quality. Why is that? Because in that case we say that people can, by people, this doesn't look exactly like a sale. If I say the word bo, it looks much more precisely like a sale. If I don't say the word bo, it's true, it's the same thing happening, but it's a more amorphous or ambiguous type of case, and therefore Chazal said it's not so good for halach. And we have several halachas like that now in a series. Okay? And Tamat Ninan. We learned over there, Lo Yomar Odom L'Chavero, a person should not sell to the Seidos friend, house a pair sold to Yerushalayim, take these fruits up to Yerushalayim L'Chalek, and we'll divide them up. Now this is Meiser Sheni fruit. You're also not allowed to make business with Meiser Sheni fruit. So you can't say that. Elom Elohalim Shenocha B'Yerushalayim, take them up, we'll eat Yerushalayim, and Nisha B'Yerushalayim, drink them Yerushalayim. Again, here the Gemara asks, and I don't know if you have this in the Gemara, right? This next line, but Ma Beina Omer L'Chalek. Do you have this line? The one is asking the same question. What's the difference between whether you say L'Chalek, we'll divide them up, Ma'abin oimer na'aleim, or just say, let's take him up. Shenochem l'shtei mushleim. What's the difference? There's no qualitative difference. As more again, Rabbi Yerushalmi Shevi'is mehalocha shel imum hi. When you say l'chalek, it means let's make a partnership in this route. That's forbidden in Meiser Shani. When you don't use the word chalek, it doesn't look like a partnership, and therefore it's okay. Similarly, Talmud Tzini, we learned over there, Shoel Adam michavero kadeyayim v'kadei shemen. A person can borrow from his friend. This is on Shabbos. A person can borrow from his friend barrels of wine and barrels of oil. As long as it doesn't say lend them to me. Because if it's a loan, so then you might come to write it down. It's a gzera that you might come to write it down. Ma'abin omer alveini. What's the image where they say lend to me? Ma'abin omer ashuleni. Or if you just say, well, in English there is no good different translation. But in Hebrew, hava is lend them to me in the monetary sense. Ashuleni is lend them to me in the give sense. Right, so what's the difference? Again, it seems to be no qualitative distinction. Again, another case where Chazal felt that ambiguity is an important fundamental precept in this halacha. Okay, the final example is a little bit more elaborate. Piton. Pasaku. The bread of a goy. Rabbi Yaakov Bar Shevi'is said, this is also one of the halachas where ambiguity was essential. Rabbi Shevi'is said, Kashyase kumi Rabbi Yaakov Baracha. I asked Rabbi Yaakov in front of Rabbi Yaakov Baracha, where is the ambiguity here? Kach anu omrim. Do we say like this? B'makom shepaz Yisrael mitzuya. In a place where there is prevalent kosher bread or Jewish baked bread, b'dinu shetei pashu goyim asura. Logic would dictate that non-Jewish baked bread is prohibited. Vimu olev itir, and they made it ambiguous, and they were matir even the non-Jewish bread, or it's the opposite. Or in a case where the Jewish bread is not prevalent, b'dinu shetei pashu goyim muteres. Logic would dictate that the bread of a goy should be permitted. Vimumul, and they made it ambiguous, and asrua, they forbade it. Which one is it? Ramana said, "V'yeshcha imum le'esar." Do we have a case where they made it ambiguous in order to make it asar? They made things ambiguous. Ambiguity was a hat there, right? Ambiguity is never an itzer, right? Ambiguity or a amorphous quality means we blur the prohibition, now we make it and blur the permissibility. Furthermore, he says, Upas, lo katav shilei goyim. I don't understand. How do you want to say that they offered bread of a goy, even where there isn't much,
there's no availability of...
Yeah, let me just make sure I get it right. Yeah, it's a separate thing. He's saying, how can you say they permitted it at all? Isn't the bread of a guy like goyish cooking, bishulakum? And kachon normally, do we say such a thing? Where there aren't Jewish cooked dishes prevalent, do we say such a thing that really this should be matit tavshili goyim? Vimum aleim asum, and nonetheless they made it ambiguous in the aseret. Whereas by bishulakum we never had such a parallel. Bishulakum is bishulakum, no matter whether there's prevalent Jewish stuff or not prevalent Jewish stuff. They didn't make any distinctions, not originally, and they didn't make it ambiguous. So what's the difference by this bread stuff? I don't know what's going on here. Elokeni says more. This is it. In a case where Jewish bread is not prevalent, just like bishulakum remains also, whether there's prevalent or not, so to pashulakum should be also, but it's not. What rather, the two of them made it ambiguous, and they were matirit. Ipasakum mishum chayin nefesh, nor the people should have what to eat. Rabbanan the Kesarin, B'Shem Rabbi Yaakov Barachos, followed Kedivrei Mishum Mati. They were Mati Pasakum, where Pasas is not prevalent, Uvad Mina Palta, but only from a baker, not from a private individual, because the Hog there Pasakos you might come to marry Goyim. So if you buy from a private individual, then you might come to socialize with them and mingle with them. But if you buy from a baker, there's less of a chashash, less of a, possibility. The law didn't came Rabban the case started themselves, even though they were matir, did not follow their own kula. They're not like an eruv. They're matir for other people, but not for themselves. Okay?
So, the Pasach was kosher. It was just baked by a guy.
Absolutely.
There's vis-a-vis
Right.
Jew.
Right. Pasach, because paspal, right. That's basically what it boils down to. Okay? Rishim Lakish Omar. V'marlos akelach. In our Mishnah it said, where you didn't say bo for the dollar, that's permissible for the Jew to go and collect from you. That's only if you show him the stalk you want him to collect. Because then all you're doing is giving him the schar for his walking there. You're not buying the vegetable from him. It makes him more like you're paying him for the work as opposed to the vegetable, because you're showing him which vegetable to collect. So he's not even looking for the vegetable.
It's like buying the box instead of what's inside.
Right. Rabbi Yochanan, if you low air low, even if he didn't show much vegetable, it's ki collect kamosh air low. It's as if you showed him the vegetable, and therefore it's permissible. You don't have to actually show him the vegetable. Now, the girsa, we're going to go to the Mishnah and stop, but the girsa to the Mishnah is messed up. Okay, well, not all the way, but most of the girsa. Okay, so pay attention here. I'm going to read you like the girsa of the Gra. Okay, probably the Red Baz brings it down. But, Masnisa pliga al Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, not Reish Lakish. On Rabbi Yochanan. The following Mishnah argues on Rabbi Yochanan. The time we learned, as the following brisa. Somebody who hires a worker to bring wine for a sick person, or tapuach, or an apple for a sick person, if the worker brought the apple, you have to reimburse him for it. If you didn't bring the apple, you don't have to reimburse him for the apple, right? But if you said to the worker, bring wine to the sick person from New York, or bring him an apple from New York, and the worker went to New York to get the apple, whether he brought the apple or not, chayav, you have to pay the worker, right? Because you didn't just ask him bring me an apple. You said, bring me the apple from place X.
But the purpose of going to New York was to get...
That doesn't matter, but the fact is I told him to go to New York. So that's why I have to pay him for the work he did. He wasn't a contractor in that case. When he gets the apple, I'll pay him. In his case, he's actually my agent, right? You pay him for the fact that he traveled. Now, this is a kash Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said, even if you didn't tell him where to go, even if you didn't tell him to take that vegetable, it's as if you told him to take that vegetable. So here too, even though you didn't tell him to go to New York, it's as if you told him to go to New York, right? Even in the case where you didn't tell him to go to New York, it should be as if you told him to go to New York. You should have to pay him regardless, right? This is more, it's not comparable. Says more, you know why? Kali Caleb here. This is from the later Teretz. They brought it in over here in the Gra. Kali Caleb Shevi'is Shumid Rabbanan. They'll be there in the Gemara out of order, and it should be here. There's a special kula by Shemitah. Here Rabbi Elon is saying the kula. He's saying I'll give you a special kula because by Shemitah the bisman is it's only the Rabbanan. So therefore, doing schayr and Shemitah fruit is only the Rabbanan. So I'll give you a kula even if he didn't show the guy where to go. It's as if he told him where to go. But I'm not going to make that a chumrah, that even if he didn't tell the guy to go to New York to get the fruit, it's as if he told him to go to New York to get the fruit, and therefore you have to pay him. To that extent, Rabbi Yochanan would never have said it as halacha. He did not say it as halacha. Now, on Reish Lakish, the following price of Masnisa, Poligal Reish Lakish, Rabbi Shimon Lakish. The Tani, we learned, Lo Yomar Adon Chavero. A person should not say to his friend, hey, look, here's $1. V'havei li leket hayom. This is a rich guy. You can't say to a poor guy, here's $1 and bring me all the leket you get today. Because that really means that the ani is working for the usher. So that's not permitted, right? He's collecting leket for the rich guy. That's prohibited, right? Haveli peyayom, or bring me payo today. Ela omer lo, rather you can say to him, beleket shetaveli ayom, for the leket which you bring me today, or the payo shetaveli ayom, or for the payo you bring me today, here's $1. But not, here's $1 for the leket you'll bring me, right? Here's $1 go bring me lekid. Here's don, go bring you payer. Rather, for the payer you'll bring me today, I'll give you $1. For the lekid you give me today, I'll bring you $1. So that's a kasha on V'chein Motzer ben Levi. Same thing is true by a Levi with Meiser. Varei El or Alo is the kasha, because here he even says, for the payer you're giving me you're going to bring me today. Varei Lo, I'm sorry. Varei Lo Er Lo. In this case, he didn't show him and say, give me that payer. He just said the payer, you bring me payer. And nonetheless, we say it's as if you made him your agent. And you're forbidden to take the payer from him. So it's kasher shlokish. It's very shlokish. Said, when is it defined as agency? When I show him, only when I show him exactly, go get that for me. And you didn't say that. So it's kasher shlokish, very low, era low. He didn't show him exactly. Nonetheless, it's considered to be an agency. Says more reconciles Brisa. He says, and here it's from before, brought it now, pasar lo b'mara lo. It's talking about a case where I said, get me that payer, that lekid in that field. And that's why it's also, because then the oni mamish becomes the agent of the usher, and that's prohibited. Okay, going further, I have a header here, because it's a new topic. Lokach min anachtom kikar v'chulei. Tanya, we learned, Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Nechemia osrin. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemia forbid, v'chachayim matir and chachamim permit. V'manachem, what are we talking about? Iba Huda Amar Lei, if it's a case where the baker said, Halach kikar, here's a loaf. Havli and pay me for it. In that case, of course, the buyer can't go out, collect vegetables, promise the vegetables, go collect and bring the vegetables of Shemitah to pay for the loaf, because that's like paying for Shemitah fruit, right? Paying with Shemitah fruit. You're using that as currency in that case, because the vegetables are being used to pay for the Shemitah. Havli v'ana yav loch. What if, however, the buyer said, the baker said, give me vegetables and I'll give you bread. In that case, it's okay. Why? Because there it's barter, and barter is mutter. It's only where the baker says, here's bread, and pay me for it, and the buyer says, I'll pay you, I'll go and get you vegetables. Then it's not barter. The vegetables become the currency. But in a pure barter, that's permitted during Shemitah. So that's not an issue. Both of those cases are clear cut. Where's the machlokas? Havli. One guy says, give me the buyer says, give me bread. Ubarli dani avlach. And for sure, I'll give you vegetables. They say it's also shady roko sodom mitzuyim, because vegetables are not so prevalent. You might end up paying him money, so it's not really barter.
This is a replacement for tape number 97, the end of the tape, which is missing. The Mishnah said that lokach min anachtom, if you take from the baker kikar bepundion, a kikar which is worth the value of a pundion, and you say kshelkot yirako sode avilacha, and you say when I gather the vegetables of the field, I will bring you. That's not a language of a mecher. That's a language of a matana. Since language of matana, so it's not a problem with osis chara peirush shvi'is. So the Mishnah, the Bryce here says, the Gemara here says in the end of Halacha Dalet, Lakim anachtom kikar v'chulei. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Nechemia osrim v'chachamim matirim. Rabbi Yehuda and Nechemia say that even shalkot yirakot soda avilach is forbidden, whereas Rabbi Chachamim are the ones who are matir. So we want to ask Pamena Kiyam, what are you talking about? Iba hidamar lei. If we're talking about a case where the fellow said, hey lach, here's a loaf of bread. Havli, pay me, give me as a reward. This vegetable is a payment. It's forbidden in that case. Everybody gets forbidden to promise in vegetables. If he says, Havli, give me vegetables, Vana yoyev lach, and then I'll give you the bread, that's okay, because it's mura, a exchange is permissible. Rather, the question is in the following case. The person said to the baker, Havli, give me bread, uvarili the ana yoyev lach, and it is literally clear to me, an undertaking which I undertake, that I will give you the vegetables. Rabbi Yehuda and Nechemia said forbidden, because they say the baker does not really anticipate getting the vegetables, since they're not so prevalent, but rather he is assuming, since the fellow said ubarili, that he's going to pay money if he doesn't find the vegetables. So it's like selling on credit, and it is forbidden. Rabbanan Savi the Shari, Rabbanan say it is permitted Mibnei Shirokas Hasadim Mitsuyin, and because we know that vegetables are prevalent. Seems like a machlokas ben mitzias, but that's the case. The Rabbanan hold the vegetables are prevalent, and therefore it's not a sale, it is a exchange, and exchange of Pirish Shvi'is, of course, is mutter.